All right, Amy, thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. So I'm going to start with a very brief PowerPoint presentation. We'll just talk about a couple of things before we actually jump into the application. And then we'll walk through TimberScan in a couple of different ways and show you what we refer to as a complete purchase to pay solution. So what we'll be talking about is purchase to pay today, managing the entire accounts payable workflow process. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I'll start my PowerPoint slide, very few slides here, but let's go ahead and get that going. Okay, make it a little bigger for everyone. Okay, so I just mentioned a moment ago, we're talking about purchase to pay. So the end in mind of purchase to pay is to have one place to retrieve everything. And basically, with that aspect of being able to go to that one central location to achieve and to be able to see everything, it's also to be able to have that application seamlessly integrated with your application, which is Sage 300 CRE. So the 7 items that we'll be addressing today, and I'll be covering, will be A, what did we purchase? And then what did we receive? So if we created a purchase order, for example, and then we had a receiver, are they in play here? Do they need to be considered? Third is what were we billed? Who approved the billing? How is it costed or coded? So we're going to talk about looking at the invoice, looking at who the approvers were, how they coded the invoice, and then once the coding is done, when we're ready to actually pay that invoice, what is the payment status? Has it been paid? Has it not? And then if we did, how was it paid? So we're going to cover all 7 of these items today as we go through the application. This last slide before we go into TimberScan is basically a workflow depiction. And let me just stop for a moment. So typically what will happen is that when I visit with someone who has not implemented TimberScan yet and is managing their AP workflow process manually for the most part, first thing I'll usually ask is, well, what are you doing today? How are you managing the AP workflow process? When an invoice arrives at your door, what happens? And typically the answer that I receive is somewhere in the neighborhood of the invoices come in, we have to print off a copy of the invoice or what have you. We take the invoice and we put it in a folder, and then from the folder someone has to open it up. They have to look at it and they have to see what if they want to hand code information on the invoice. Eventually it makes its way to accounting. Accounting goes ahead and keys the invoice in. And then at some point the invoice, the checks are cut and the invoice gets paid. With TimberScan, we take that manual process and we basically eliminate it from start to finish. So we're going to talk about, first of all, getting the invoice into the application initially. When the invoice comes in, we'll talk about how that happens and what happens with that. Once that invoice has been acquired, even if that invoice came in the mail, the paper basically goes away. There's no need for any paper from that point on. Once it's been acquired, it goes to what we call initial data entry. It's going to accounts payable. We're going to start the invoice entry process in TimberScan before it gets sent off to the approvers. Now, some companies that send it to the approver first, have them hand code the information and then get it. They'll look at this and think, well, this is somewhat backward from what we currently do. But you'll see that when we start this process, how seamless it is. Doesn't have to be fully coded. There could be a scenario where maybe I know what job it's associated with, but I don't know what the cost coding should be, what have you. It doesn't matter. You can still get the invoice routed off to the approvers. They come into TimberScan, they approve their invoices. Once they've approved the invoices, there is a final review step. It's basically just to have that one last look at the invoices after they've been approved. And then once that happens, those invoices get sent to Sage 300 CRE. Once they get sent to Sage 300 CRE, they've updated Sage. All of the information has been updated, and now your financials are updated, and now you're at the point where you're ready to go ahead and execute payment. And then once payment takes place, TimberScan has the ability to take the information that would normally be sent to a printer, and we can actually execute that again electronically, so that we're executing electronic payments as opposed to having to pay those invoices manually with a check. And if you can just bear with me for 1 second, I apologize. Someone is trying to enter here, and I just need to let them know that I'm busy. So I apologize. I will be right back. Okay. All right. So we're going to take from here. We are going to jump out of the PowerPoint. We're going to go directly into the application. We're going to walk through TimberScan, and we're going to follow these steps. We're going to talk about how this allows us to become far more efficient, where we're able to see things very quickly, very easily, be able to access information, and also to be able to kind of manage the entire workflow process from purchase to pay. So with that, let's go ahead out of the PowerPoint, and let's get into, excuse me 1 second. Here we go. Let's go into TimberScan. So I'm going to show you TimberScan in a couple of different flavors. We're going to start with TimberScan in this application, and I'm going to show you a different aspect of TimberScan that you can take advantage of if you want to. Now again, we're going to look at this from that workflow perspective, invoices coming in, they arrive at your door, and how we manage them. So when an invoice comes in, to get the invoices into TimberScan initially, and before I do that, let me just basically kind of introduce to you what we're looking at here. So what you have are basically all of your menu items here across the top. And as I select anything here, if I select the reports menu, for example, you see it brings up all the series of reports. And I can choose any report that I wanted to go into, and then it will just open up that report into the viewer as you see down below. We have dashboard functionality throughout the application. You're noticing here these widgets that I have set up allow me to be able to see invoices by vendor, for example, by job, by days to discount, those types of things, or other things if I wanted to choose, I can select to be able to view. But it gives you that initially that 20,000 foot view. So I log into TimberScan, and initially I'm able to see, for example, invoices by vendor that are sitting in final review. What does that look like, and who are they? Notice as I hover the mouse around the pie chart how it starts to bring up these tooltips that tell me who the vendor is and how many invoices, what the dollar amount is. Same thing with job. So this is one aspect of many that I could choose to be able to view. And then if I wanted to, I could actually select, for example, a vendor or a job, and I could drill in, and I'm able to actually go right to the individual invoices that are associated with that particular vendor, that job, or whatever it happens to be. Okay, let's go through a workflow. I'm going to touch on several things here. And as I mentioned, I'm going to show you TimberScan in a couple of different flavors. So I'm going to start at the point where an invoice arrives at your door. To get them into TimberScan initially, you choose the acquire function. You would choose the option acquire images. It opens up this viewer. Several ways in which you can go about acquiring an invoice. You could drag and drop. So if an invoice came in the mail and I wanted to be able to just, came in by way of email, I want to grab the attachment right from the email, I can go ahead and do that. If it's sitting in a folder, sitting on my desktop, I can just grab an attachment like I'm going to do right now. Just going to go ahead and pull it in, open it up. the invoice and the succeeding pages to the invoice or invoices open up into the viewer like you see here. I can zoom in and zoom out if I want, or I can just use the wheel of my mouse like I'm doing now. It makes the document larger or smaller on the screen. I can scroll down through the thumbnail as you see here on the left-hand side, and I can see all of the various pages. If, for example, invoice 1 and invoice 2 are two separate invoices, or pages 1 and 2 are two separate invoices, I can simply right-click, insert a break, and I just separated those two invoices. So it's very easy to be able to drag and drop an invoice or documents into the viewer, and then if I need to separate, I go ahead and do so. I'll talk about what happens once we've acquired them or pulled them into the viewer once we get a little bit further. But drag and drop is one option. Second option would be email. A lot of clients have set up a designated AP email address where they've asked vendors and subs to email their invoices. If that's the case, what you can do is TimberScan has an email monitoring tool that works behind the scenes. What it does is it will take the attachment from the email and it will drop it into a file. And then from that file in the acquire screen, I can just select that particular file that I'm pulling my emailed invoices from. And again, I'll just come in here, I'll open up that file. Those emailed invoices are now sitting here. They've all been dropped into this particular folder or file. I just open them up all together in one batch. They're all now sitting here in the viewer. And then once they're in the viewer, then I proceed to acquire them, which we're going to talk about in a second. Very simple, very easy. I don't need to necessarily go out and drag and drop every single invoice image from an email. The system will basically do all of that for me behind the scenes. I can just open it up out of a file and it's sitting right here in the viewer. Other option is invoices that come in the mail. In that case, what you can do is you can put them onto your scanning device. Here where it says image source, you'll reference that particular device that you scan them to. So you're going to scan them to a file somewhere, again, as if almost like what happens with email, only with email, we're dropping them into a file for you. In this case, you're going to scan them to a file. And then once you reference that scan file, you do the exact same thing. You just open up that scan file, you find those invoices, you just go ahead and pull all of those in, and they do the exact same thing. They just pop into the viewer like we see here. Now, once they're sitting in the viewer, if I'm ready to go ahead and acquire them, I select the data entry group that I'm going to assign them to. Remember back to the PowerPoint slide a couple of minutes ago. We're not going to send these off to the approvers yet. They're going to go to accounts payable invoice entry. So in data entry, this is my person or group of people that I want to assign these invoices to. And you can have multiple people here, multiple groups, it doesn't matter. I'm just saying, take these invoices, assign them to this particular group or person, and when I hit process, the invoices come out of the viewer, they'll get sent off to this person or group, and they'll pick them up, and they'll start processing those invoices in TimberScan. That's where we're going to go next. Okay, so we've acquired some invoices very seamlessly, very simple, very easy ways for me to go about doing that. I've now created an electronic document. There's no need for me to have to manage anything from here on out. I can do everything electronically. I don't need to actually physically handle a piece of paper. When I go to invoice entry, which is where we're going to go now, I've got a bunch of invoices that I've acquired. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to call up randomly the first invoice in the batch. Okay, there's several things that I want to touch on with AP invoice entry. First, you'll notice that the image is in the upper part of the window. Again, I can just size it, make it as large or small as I need to on the screen. I have my data entry grid on the lower part of the window with a whole series of control buttons on the bottom and top. You'll also notice that the data entry grid down here at the bottom, what this is an exact replication of the AP entry grid that's currently in Sage 300 CRE. Now, this might not these fields may not look exactly like yours, but when you implement TimberScan, it's implemented in such a way that we take those fields from AP invoice entry on your Sage 300 CRE experience, and we pull them back into TimberScan so they're lined up in the exact same order and they function the exact same way. Now we did that because we want to make this AP entry experience as seamless for you and not have you have to enter your invoices in a completely different foreign application. We want it to mimic what you would do in Sage 300 CRE. So when we start talking about TimberScan, one of the key attributes of the application is the deep integration that we built into Sage 300 CRE. And one of those things that we've done is we've replicated the AP user experience. Okay, let's continue here. I'm going to go ahead and start entering this invoice. I don't know the vendor code for power equipment rental, just like in Sage. I can go ahead and search through my list. I can sort by vendor number, name, or address. We've added address to our search to make it easier. But I can also, for example, vendor name, I can just start typing in power equipment rental and it narrows the search and it goes and finds it. All of your master files in TimberScan that you're searching, vendor, job, cost code, GL account code, commitment, all that is coming directly from Sage 300 CRE. Again, that integration that we've built makes it as if TimberScan is basically just something that's layered on top of Sage 300 CRE. It's just an extension, basically. So I go ahead and select that particular vendor code. If you're using compliance, you're going to get these compliance warnings if anything happens to be out of compliance. When I plug in the invoice number, if it's a duplicate invoice, it will stop me immediately. Again, looking at that integration to Sage, it's now telling me I have a duplicate invoice. I didn't have to go all the way through this process, and then when I'm getting ready to push this invoice to Sage 300 CRE, find out that, oops, we have a duplicate invoice. It knows already. Now, let's stop for a moment, and let's just say, I want to take a look. I'm trying to figure out, when did we process invoice 24011 for power equipment rentals previously? I don't have to leave this screen. I can stay here. All I'm going to do is down at the bottom, I'm just going to hit the history button, and it's going to open up a list of all of the invoices for power equipment rental. It lays it out in what looks like kind of an Excel spreadsheet format to make it very easy for me to be able to sort, group, sum the totals. So if I wanted to sort, I just click on the column heading. I just sorted by status in this case. Now, these are not just invoices that are in TimberScan. These are all the invoices. These are invoices that are also in Sage 300 CRE. So I've selected all of the invoices in the history, and I'm looking for that duplicate. So I look at it. It's right here. I see the original invoice date, the accounting date, when it was paid, if it was. When I click on the detail button, now what I see are how that invoice was coded. What commitments, jobs, cost codes. This is a single line entry. But on a multi-line entry, I'd get all the line items listed down the page. Another thing that you can do, you can hover the mouse on the commitment, the job, the cost code, the category, and it brings up a tooltip that will provide you with additional information related to that particular field. For example, if I hover the mouse on the commitment, I can see the original committed amount, any change orders, what's been paid, what's been invoiced in the balance. On the job, I can see the revised contract amount of the job and the job to date billings. On the cost code, you can see what's been invoiced on the cost code, how it compares against the revised estimate. Same thing against the cost category. So this is really pretty cool stuff. We're basically taking data that we're referencing from Sage 300 CRE, and we're pulling it back into TimberScan right here on the screen for me able to see right at my fingertips if I want. This is available everywhere in TimberScan, not just here on this screen. Everywhere you go, you can see these tooltips. Okay, one other thing. Let's say that I've looked at the detail. I want to see the original invoice. Here it is. Okay, someone put a sticky note and I see that. Behind the invoice, I have all my supporting documents. Here's a purchase order that's been attached. And then with every single invoice in the system, TimberScan also attaches something called an approval page. It's basically an audit log that shows me every iteration of the invoice from the time that it was received in my home all the way through the AP entry, the approval, the final review, and the posting of that invoice in Sage 300 CRE. You get an audit like this for every single invoice that's attached to it. Okay, so talk about visibility. I mean, you can see that I'm able to see just a wealth of information that's right here at my fingertips for me to be able to see anything that I need to associated with an invoice. So we want to go back. I haven't left the AP invoice entry screen. At this point, I'll just go ahead and append the invoice. And then we're going to type in dollar amount. We're going to drop down to the distribution. If you're processing invoices using a commitment, you can simply reference the commitment here. You can select your commitment out from the list, choose your line items that you want to invoice against. And then once you say okay, it will then, once we make it through the compliance warnings, it will then pull up all of the line items that we reference. Notice how you get this commitment summary on the right-hand side that will show you where we stand against the commitment. If the balance goes negative, it highlights that for you in red. You can always hover the mouse on any of these fields like we saw before to get these tooltips if I need to see any of this info. But if I'm finished with the invoice at this point, from an accounts payable perspective, and I want to send it off for approval, all I have to do is hit the accept button, and that invoice goes off to the approvers. Now it gets there based on the business rules, the workflows that you set up behind the scenes. One of the first things that you do when you implement TimberScan is you set up these workflow business rules. They're meant to reflect how you route invoices today. If you said, well, we would normally just route this to the project manager for job 03001, we can actually extract the project manager credentials from the job in Sage 300 CRE and apply them here. So there's virtually nothing that you have to set up in the workflow. It just finds the project manager for this particular job. I accept the invoice and off it goes. But you can have multiple approvers. You can set up thresholds. You can say, we want to route, certain vendors. We're not going to route to the same people. All sorts of different scenarios that you can set up. We haven't found a scenario in the nearly 20 years that TimberScan has been processed that we haven't been able to resolve. Okay. That's processing an invoice against a commitment. Let's go ahead and delete these lines for just a second. Talk about one other thing. Let's say I don't have a commitment or I don't reference one. Maybe I want to go out and I want to say, I'm going to charge it to job 03001. But I don't know how it's supposed to be coded. I want my approvers to do the coding. I can go ahead and accept the invoice. Off it goes to the approvers. They're going to pick it up and they're going to start coding the invoice themselves. That's something that's available to them. So you don't have to have an invoice fully entered and coded in AP invoice entry. You can simply leave it in whatever format it's in as long as the header information is filled in, accept the invoice, and TimberScan will look at the business rules and then figure out what to do next. So in this case, if it said, oh, we need to route it based on the job, then it's going to go ahead and do that. And then the approvers will go in and they'll finish the coding. Now, having said that, you can restrict access. So some clients have said, we want the approvers to come in, look, and tell us what needs to be coded, but we don't want them actually doing the coding themselves. You can set up the system with those types of restrictions so that coding, people can view, they can add notes, put a note in and say, what cost code this is supposed to be associated with, for example, but they don't actually do the coding themselves. Okay, we've talked about TimberScan from this perspective. There are a lot of other things that we could cover here in the AP invoice entry. Things like you can move the screen around. So if I said, I want to take this and I want to move it so I have the invoice on one side, I have the data entry on the other. We could talk about supporting documents attaching, emailing from here, all the annotations, but we're going to leave it at this point right now. I'm going to step out of here and I'm going to show you one other thing that I think is very important associated with AP invoice entry. What you saw me do so far is I took this invoice and I basically went in and I keyed in all of the information myself. But TimberScan has an optical character recognition component to it. It's called TimberScan Capture. And for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the view and I'm going to show you this in a little different format. Now I could do it in this version, but I want to show you something a little bit different. This is my segue to get us into TimberScan in the browser. So we're going to get out of here. I'm going to bring up the browser version of TimberScan and I'm going to explain why I'm doing this. So this is called TimberScan Go. It is the exact same application that you see here. I call this more the desktop application, where you're coming into basically logging in on your desktop, on your server, and you're processing your transactions on your desktop. This TimberScan Go was designed in a browser. What we did, we initially designed TimberScan Go from an approver's perspective. Why did we do that? Because the browser will fit to any device. So I could be on my phone, and I'm going to show you an example of this in a few minutes when we go to the approval side. But I could be on my phone, and I could call up my invoices on my phone, and I could approve them from there. So I don't have to be in the office necessarily to approve my invoices. What we've done over the last several years is we've started taking all of the features and functionality that's embedded into the desktop, and we've moved it over here to the browser. So you might be asking, well, why did I show you this version? Well, the reason I did is because some clients prefer, especially when it comes to AP invoice entry, they prefer to use the AP entry in this version as opposed to the browser. They just feel like it makes it easier, it's smoother, it makes it, it's just a little bit perhaps easier to work with. I'm not necessarily agreeing or saying that that's true. I'm just saying that that's what some clients choose to do. What I want to show you now is I'm going to go back into AP invoice entry. I'm going to call up some invoices here. And I want to show you this in a different version. I may have gotten logged out here. Let me just double check. And let's bring this up. Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to call up an invoice. All right. So what you're seeing now is two things that I wanted to highlight. First, AP invoice entry in the browser in TimberScan Go, and also the OCR capture tool that we built. So what you'll notice on this particular invoice for Bishop Concrete is some of the fields on the invoice image have been highlighted. And if you look down here at the AP entry, you'll also notice that a lot of these fields have already been pre-populated. So I open up this invoice, the invoice number, the invoice date, the due date, the dollar amount have all been filled in already. Basically, what happens is that in our optical character recognition tool, we have something built in there called Smart Extraction. What it does is it goes out and it looks for wherever the invoice number is on the invoice image itself. It looks for the invoice date, the due date. And notice how some of the terminology is different on the actual invoice, right? So this says billing date, but the system is smart enough to know that that's the invoice date. So on and so forth. So there's certain things that even though the terminology on the invoice might be different, the system is smart enough to recognize that. It takes that data, it goes ahead, it populates the invoice entry screen. Now, let's say that one of the things that it didn't necessarily find was my vendor code for Bishop Concrete. What I could do is I can go out, I can search the vendor file, I can populate my vendor number for Bishop Concrete, and then once I save this, it will remember every time we get an invoice for Bishop Concrete going forward that it's supposed to be charged to vendor number 203. That's how quickly and easily you can start to not only use smart extraction, but also start to build profiles for your various vendor invoices, and it will start auto-populating these fields. This job number, this came from me setting up a template behind the scenes and using this location, job location as my identifier to say, when it looks at that, at a Bishop Concrete pumping invoice, and it finds the word trapping, which means, that's basically the job that it's associated with, go ahead and auto-populate job number 03015. So you can get to not only letting the system auto-populate some of the basic header information through smart extraction, but you can get to more detail here and really get down and start to identify certain key fields on the invoice that you want to be able to populate and use for whatever purpose you need. Okay, so, and of course, the other things here, we talked about the tooltips, they work everywhere. So here, I'm able to do the same thing that I was able to do on the desktop. Same thing with commitment, cost code, all of that. It all works the same way. And it's just really your choice. It's your preference, which option you choose, which one you want to use. I wanted to show you both, give you both flavors, and give you the choice as to which one you think is preferable to you. Okay, let's say that we've gone ahead, we've accepted the invoices, they've been sent off to the approvers. Let's look at this from an approver's perspective for a moment. I'm an approver, I'm logged in, I'm going to use TimberScan Go. Now I could, again, let me just emphasize, I could on my desktop, there is an approval option. I could go in and I can approve my invoices this way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the browser, and I'll show you why in a second. So I'm going to take this invoice. Excuse me. I'm really just looking at my, see what my dashboard looks like first. But I'm going to go in. I'm going to say, let's go in and start approving some invoices. I'm going to select power equipment rental. Calls up the invoice. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch this format for a moment. And we'll just go ahead and reset this. Okay, so what I've done on the screen is I've simulated what would happen if I called up this invoice on my iPhone 12. So I'm on my iPhone, I select my invoice, it calls it up, I can see the invoice and any of the supporting documents behind it if I need to. And behind this, I have this gray button at the top, the green button at the bottom, give me the opportunity to do everything that I could do if I were sitting at my desk, either in the browser or on my desktop. So I can approve it, I can reject it, I can put it on hold, I could look at how it's coded, add notes, route it on the fly to whoever I need to, email it off to someone from here if I needed to, download it. We're going to not print because we want to try and avoid doing anything with paper if we can avoid it. So regardless of whether I'm on my phone, I'm sitting out at home, maybe I open up my iPad, I want to call it up there, or I'm sitting at my desk and I want to be able to just call it up in the browser like I'm doing here. No matter where I am, the system will allow me to be able to process and approve the invoice from anywhere. Now, it's not an app, quote unquote app that you download from the App Store. It's a hyperlink basically from the URL that we select. And basically what will happen is that on your phone, you're going to see this green TimberScan Go wheel. Once you tap that wheel, that acts just like an app. And what it does is it will just open up your invoices on that particular device, and you'll be able to go through and do exactly what I just said. Okay, so I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about the approvals. I'll just mention a couple things. If you reject or put an invoice on hold, you have to put a reason in as to why you're doing so. That way, if anyone else wants to know what the status is, they can see it. Now, what's going to happen is these invoices eventually are going to get coded. They're going to be approved. And then once they get approved, they go through a final review step. And in final review, which I can do in either version of the browser or, on my desktop, I'm going to look at them in final review, and they're going to be passed from TimberScan to Sage 300 CRE. It's not an export and then an import. It's a seamless pass of those invoices through the Sage API. Once they get to Sage 300 CRE, the only thing that has to be done is they're going to be sitting in an unposted state. They just have to be posted in Sage 300 CRE, and then your financials, your AP has been updated. Okay, so I'm in Sage 300 CRE right now. I'm going to, let's say that I've gone ahead and I've posted some invoices. Let's just take a look at what you can see in Sage. So let me go into an invoice register, for example. And we'll scroll down to power equipment rental. Look at invoice 24011. When I click on the paperclip, I'm able to see the invoice image, and I'm able to see all of the supporting documents all the way down to how it was paid. So when we send over data from TimberScan to Sage 300 CRE, we don't just send the data, we also send the attached images along with it. And I think this is an important point for me to make at this juncture. We also have an integration to Procore. So if you are processing transactions in Procore, what TimberScan can do is we can acquire those the payable information, the invoice, if you will, call it an invoice, for lack of a better term, from Procore, push it through TimberScan to Sage 300 CRE. The beauty of that is that it also sends an image. Even if Procore didn't actually have a physical image associated with it, we create one. So when you get that invoice into Sage, you're not only going to see the data that would come from Procore, you're also going to see the attached images as well. All right. Let's go through kind of the final step in the process here before we wrap up. So we've talked about managing the invoice from the time it arrives at your door through the approval process of the actual invoice itself to updating Sage 300 CRE. Let's say we're now ready to cut checks. TimberScan has the ability to allow you, if you so choose, to not necessarily have to print your checks out to a physical printer. So you would still go into your print checks option in Sage, like you normally would. But in here, when you select your invoices to pay and you go to print checks, under the printer setup, we've built a tool called Print to Avid. What it does is it will intercept what would normally go to your printer, and it will grab that information and it will send it over to TimberScan for you to manage it there. So let's say that I just selected some invoices to pay. I come in here to my print checks. I say I want to go ahead and print. I choose the Print to Avid function, and I go ahead and start this print. So it doesn't send anything to the printer. Instead, what it does is it sends that data back to TimberScan, and it puts it in the Avid Pay Control section of TimberScan Go. So in here, I'm going to call up some payments that we just generated. Let's just go ahead and browse all of them, but we'll look at the very first one. Okay, so what you're seeing here is a simulation of what you would typically get if you printed out checks. It has the check information at the bottom, the stub information at the top, and the invoices that the check is referencing in the middle. it also automatically attached the actual invoice image and all of the supporting documents behind that particular check. So think of it this way. In some organizations, there's a scenario where checks get printed by someone. Those checks then have to be attached. Maybe it's paper clipped to the invoice and supporting documents. Maybe there's a purchase order behind it. And then they have to be handed off to someone, perhaps the check signer, the CEO, whatever, for that person to have to sign off and approve those particular checks. What we're doing here, when we went into that print checks option in Sage, and then we took that data and passed it to TimberScan, is we just created an electronic copy of what would normally get sent to the printer. And we automatically attached the check to the invoice. So that none of that has to be done manually. Now, if I'm here, I can look at this and say, okay, I'm ready to go ahead and approve this. However, there is one other feature that we haven't talked about yet, and that is that TimberScan also has a lien waiver aspect to it. You can manage your lien waivers through TimberScan. And when a lien waiver gets returned, the system will be updated with that lien waiver information. Whether you're using the compliance portion of Sage or not, we still automatically update that for you. And then if I wanted to look at what a lot of people use or refer to as a lien log, which is basically in many cases managed using an Excel spreadsheet, I'm able to see all that information here. So I've got my lien information. I'm able to see what the status is, and I could actually just go ahead and email right from here if I wanted to, or set up an automated email notification to whoever the sub is that we're waiting to get the lien waiver back from, for example. And I can see, here's my lien status. I've got all my information associated with this, like an Excel spreadsheet. And that brings me back to where we were before with the pay, where I could use this as I'm going through and approving my payments. Did we get the lien waiver back for this or not? System will tell you that, and it will let you know. Okay. Now, in some cases, there's a concern of, well, when we release the payment, we have no idea what happens after that. Well, you do here, because we also have something called the pay inquiry. What the pay inquiry allows me to do is I can go in and I can look at the status of any single payment that got released to the AvidPay network. Let's take Kingston Plumbing here as an example. Gives me all the detail that I need to tell me what the status is. Here's the check number that was assigned to it from Sage 300 CRE. Here's the bank that it was drawn from. Here's how it was paid. It was paid by virtual card. Here's the vendor information. And it tells me that it's a cleared payment. How did that happen? Okay, let me look at, if I just click on the plus sign, I'm able to, I refer to this as the UPS tracker. It shows me everything that takes place with that particular payment once it got released to the AvidPay network and when it became a cleared payment. So all of this took place. I'm able to see everything along the way. So basically what happens is that you release those payments, Avid goes ahead and pays the vendor on your behalf, and we do it based on the vendor's preference of how they want to be paid. Virtual card, ACH, or check. And oh, by the way, this information that we were just looking at, every time we generate an electronic payment, this proof of payment document that we create also gets automatically attached to the invoice. So this would replace that actual physical check attached to the invoice. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left. There's a lot more that we could show, but I think just from the perspective of taking you through the workflow, I think, Amy, we're going to stop at this point and we'll open it up for any questions and any follow-up.
Okay. So there have not been any questions during the presentation. Does anyone have anything that they would like to ask Mike? If you do, please go ahead and use the chat feature. No questions?
Okay, wow. Going once,
Uh,
going once, going twice, right?
Someone's asking if it's being recorded. Yes, today's presentation is recorded. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we will send out a link to the presentation either this afternoon or tomorrow morning as a follow-up, and you can share it with anyone you'd like within your company or other colleagues that you may know that might be interested in TimberScan. I think it's a pretty cool tool. I've sat on these webinars quite a bit now over the past year and a half, and it's a pretty interesting, it's pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's worth, I'm glad you mentioned that, Amy. I think it's worth noting that we Avid Exchange and Aktion Associates have worked together for a long time. And we have a number of shared clients. So if you have any questions about, well, is TimberScan a new product? It's been around for quite a while, very well vetted, lots and lots of clients, lots of people that say wonderful things about it. And I'm sure that your account executive at Aktion can point you in the direction of some people that are using it that are very, very happy with it.
Yes. And your sales rep will be copied on the email that goes out, so they will be aware that you were on today's presentation and that you might be interested in learning more. We can always do one-off demos if you have any questions or want to learn specific things for your organization that Mike didn't cover today. All right, well, we'll give you all back 10 minutes to your hour, and hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate your time today, and hope to talk to you again soon.
All righty. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.